I should have known I was in trouble the first time I saw her. It was a gorgeous Saturday morning, the kind where the sun hits just right, making you feel like you've got your life together. Birds were chirping. The smell of fresh-cut grass hung in the air, and I was finally tackling a long-overdue home improvement project, staining my front porch. Nothing crazy, just a simple upgrade. Or so I thought. Then came the voice. "Excuse me, excuse me." I glanced up, and there she was. Shoulder-length blonde bob, crisp white capris, a pastel floral blouse buttoned all the way up like she was about to lead a PTA meeting. She clutched a clipboard like it held the nuclear codes, and behind her oversized sunglasses, I just knew, that she was glaring at me like I'd just spit on the American flag. "Hi," I said cautiously, setting down my brush. "I'm Linda Beckman," she announced, as if the name should mean something to me. "President of the Oak Ridge Homeowners Association." Ah, one of those. "Nice to meet you, Linda," I said, keeping it polite. She did not return the sentiment. Instead, she tilted her head toward my half-stained porch and pursed her lips like she'd just sucked on a lemon. "That color," she said, her voice dripping with disapproval. "It's not approved." I blinked. "Come again?" She tapped her clipboard. "HOA Regulation 14B states that any exterior modifications must be pre-approved. That includes staining, painting, fencing," she waved a hand, "cosmetic alterations of any kind." I looked at my porch. It was a standard walnut brown. Nothing neon, nothing offensive, just wood-colored wood. "I'm pretty sure it's fine," I said. "It's just stain." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Fine? That's not really up to you now, is it?" And just like that, the nightmare began. What followed was a masterclass in bureaucratic hell. Within 24 hours, a formal violation notice appeared in my mailbox. By Monday, I had a $250 fine for staining my own damn porch. I should have just let it go, paid the fine, apologized. But something about Linda, the smugness, the clipboard, the way she clearly lived for this kind of petty authority, made my blood boil. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I fought back. I appealed the fine. She rejected it. I requested a hearing. She delayed it. I showed up at the next HOA meeting with documentation, proving my stain color was a shade darker than an already approved one. She called it deliberate defiance. Then came the next violation, improper trash bin placement, followed by another, grass exceeding allowable height by 0.75 inches. By the time she fined me for unauthorized decorative lighting, which, for the record, were 2 solar-powered lanterns lining my walkway, I realized this wasn't about rules anymore. Linda Beckman had declared war. Things escalated fast. First, the passive-aggressive notes. They started small, taped to my door, stuffed in my mailbox. Friendly reminders about my duty to the community. Then came the public shaming. Linda had a neighborhood Facebook group where she regularly posted about certain residents who fail to respect Oak Ridge standards. She never named names, but the descriptions were a little too specific for comfort. And then the fines. Oh, the fines. One day, I got a notice that my mailbox was not in compliance because the post was 2 inches too tall. A week later, she hit me with a $500 penalty for operating an unauthorized business from home. Apparently, my side hustle selling custom wood carvings on Etsy constituted commercial activity that required an HOA permit, one that, conveniently, she controlled. At this point, I had 2 choices: cave in and let Linda steamroll me into submission, or make her regret ever messing with me. Guess which one I picked. The next time I saw Linda, she was in my driveway, arms crossed, scowling at my truck like it had personally insulted her ancestors. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice tight with manufactured politeness. "It's Nick," I corrected, leaning against my truck. She didn't acknowledge that. Instead, she took a dramatic breath, like she was about to deliver life-altering news. "Due to your continued non-compliance, the HOA board has decided to move forward with formal action." I raised an eyebrow. "Formal action?" She handed me an envelope. "You're being evicted." I laughed. I actually laughed. "Evicted? From my own house?" She smiled, and this time there was warmth in it, the warmth of someone who loved having power over other people's lives. Failure to abide by HOA regulations constitutes a breach of contract. You've racked up over $6,000 in fines. Per Oak Ridge bylaws, if you fail to settle the balance, the HOA has the right to foreclose on your property. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but there wasn't one. Linda was serious. I glanced down at the envelope in my hands, then back up at her smug, self-satisfied face. That's when I knew. She thought she'd won. She had no idea who she was messing with. I stared at Linda, her self-satisfied smirk practically daring me to crumble under the weight of her manufactured authority. I could almost hear the smug little voice in her head. Another non-compliant homeowner crushed under the iron fist of the Oak Ridge HOA. Not today, Linda. Keeping my expression neutral, I slid the notice back into the envelope and folded my arms. You sure about this? Her smirk faltered just a bit. Excuse me? This whole evict me from my own house thing. You really want to go down this road? Her lips pursed. You have violated multiple HOA bylaws. The board has determined... I cut her off. The board? Oh, you mean you. Her jaw tightened. The HOA acts in the best interest of the community. Funny, I said, tapping the envelope against my palm, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just enjoy screwing with people. Linda sniffed, clearly unfazed. You have until the end of the month to settle your fines. Otherwise, the foreclosure process will begin. With that, she pivoted on her blindingly white sneakers and strutted off down my driveway like she'd just handed down a Supreme Court ruling. I exhaled slowly, gripping the envelope. I had about 3 weeks before Linda tried to legally rip my home out from under me. 3 weeks to put an end to this. I needed leverage. For the next few days, I did some digging. I combed through the HOA bylaws, every dense, ridiculous page of them. I pored over local property records, looking for anything I could use against Linda. I even befriended Old Man Jenkins 3 houses down, one of the original residents of the neighborhood, who was more than happy to tell me about how the HOA wasn't always a dictatorship. Apparently, before Linda seized control, things were normal. Then late one night, I found it, a simple overlooked clause buried in the original community development agreement. It changed everything. I didn't go looking for Linda. I didn't have to. She found me. It was a bright Tuesday morning when she showed up on my porch again, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose like she was about to issue another decree. Mr. Carter. It's Nick, I said, leaning against the door frame. She ignored me. Since you have failed to take corrective action, the board is moving forward with... I held up a hand. Save it, Linda. Her nostrils flared. Excuse me? I grinned. I know something you don't, she scoffed. That's highly unlikely. Oh, I don't know about that, I said, stepping onto the porch. Tell me, Linda, how much... Do you really know about this neighborhood? Her lips pursed. I know enough. I nodded. Right. Then you must already be aware that according to the original development agreement, the entire Oak Ridge subdivision, including all 12 properties, was privately purchased 25 years ago by a single entity. She blinked. What? I pulled out my phone, flipping to a screenshot of the record I'd found. You see, Linda, when the developers built Oak Ridge, they didn't sell the lots individually. They sold all of them to a single investor, who then leased the homes to residents before eventually granting them ownership under a unique deed structure. Her fingers tightened around her clipboard. That's impossible. Oh, it's very possible, I said, swiping to the next page. And guess what, Linda? The ownership of those original deeds never fully transferred. There was one final oversight. One last holding entity that retained legal claim over every single property in this neighborhood, including yours. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I let the silence stretch, let her squirm. Then I delivered the final blow. That entity? I said, tapping my chest. It's me. Linda took a half step back, as if the words physically struck her. You're lying, I grinned. Nope, paperwork's right here. I pulled a neatly folded document from my pocket, the notarized, legally binding proof that, thanks to a loophole in the property records, I technically owned every home on this street, including hers. Linda's face turned an unnatural shade of red. This is outrageous. You can't. I can. I crossed my arms. And you know what that means, Linda? She swallowed hard. It means you have been violating my property rules. I smirked. And per HOA regulations, the ones you so lovingly enforce, I have every right to begin the eviction process. Her breath hitched. You wouldn't dare. Oh, wouldn't I? I pulled out my phone again. I've already got the paperwork drafted. It just needs a signature. Linda's hands trembled. You can't do this. I shrugged. You tried to take my home. Fair's fair, right? Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time since I'd met her, Linda Beckman was speechless. Then, something snapped. This is harassment, she shrieked. I'll sue you. I chuckled. Oh, Linda, you love the rules, but you never thought they'd turn against you, did you? She spun on her heel, storming down my driveway. But I wasn't done. Oh, and Linda, I called after her. She hesitated, shoulders tense. I think I'll be waiving all those HOA fines now, I said. Oh, and you might want to get a lawyer, because your eviction notice, it's in the mail. She let out an incoherent scream and stomped away, her clipboard nearly cracking in half from how hard she gripped it. I smiled to myself. War was over, or so I thought. For a brief, glorious moment, I believed I had won. I imagined Linda packing her bags, defeated, slinking off to terrorize some other neighborhood far, far away. Maybe she'd finally take up knitting, or join one of those suburban book clubs where no one actually reads the books. But Linda Beckman was not a woman who went down quietly. The retaliation started within hours. First came the email blast. I woke up the next morning to an inbox flooded with messages from the Oak Ridge Community Forum. Residents were freaking out over an urgent update from the HOA president. Linda, of course, had written it. Fellow Oak Ridge homeowners, she began, in that sickly sweet yet patronizing tone she loved. It has come to my attention that a certain individual has made false and outrageous claims about the ownership of our beloved neighborhood. This person is attempting to destroy the community we have all worked so hard to maintain. I urge you to remain vigilant in these troubling times. Do not believe the lies. And my favorite part? HOA leadership will not be intimidated by fraudulent schemes and baseless legal threats. She really thought she could bluff her way out of this. Then she got desperate. She went door to door. I caught her pacing up and down the block, stopping. At each house, clipboard in hand, riling up the neighbors with her usual fear-mongering nonsense. I could imagine the speech. That man is trying to take our homes. He's a scam artist. He's dangerous. But here's where Linda made her fatal mistake. She underestimated just how much everyone hated her. People listened, sure. They nodded, politely. But the moment she walked away, guess where they went? Straight to my porch. One by one, neighbors knocked on my door, asking me what the hell was actually going on. So I told them the truth, about the fines, about the harassment, about the loophole that gave me full legal ownership of the entire street, including Linda's house. And, well, let's just say Linda wasn't as popular as she thought she was. Turned out, she'd been terrorizing everyone for years. She fined one family for having excessively cheerful holiday decorations. She forced another neighbor to repaint their shutters twice because she kept changing her mind about which shade of beige was acceptable. She even threatened to ban a retired veteran from flying his American flag because it was too large. That last one really pissed people off. The tide shifted fast. Within days, the real community meeting happened. Not an HOA-sanctioned one, our meeting, right in my backyard, where the neighborhood finally had a say in things without Linda silencing dissenters, and the verdict was unanimous. Linda had to go. The official eviction notice arrived at her doorstep on a bright, sunny morning. It was poetic, really. The same legal jargon she had used to bully everyone else was now being used against her. A printed, legally binding notice, stating that she had 30 days to vacate the premises of the home she thought she controlled. I didn't have to be there when she opened it. I heard the scream from 2 houses away. For the next few weeks, Linda fought tooth and nail to stay. She threatened lawsuits. She demanded emergency board meetings. She even called the local news to paint herself as the poor, persecuted HOA leader being driven out by a neighborhood coup. No one bought it, and then, just when I thought I'd seen the last of her, she pulled one last stunt. I was outside, chatting with some neighbors, when a moving truck pulled into Linda's driveway. I should have felt victorious, but something was off. She wasn't packing, she was smirking, and then I saw it, a for sale sign going up in my yard. Linda strolled over, arms crossed. "Oops," she said, feigning innocence. "Looks like you missed a little clause in your own contract." I narrowed my eyes. "What the hell are you talking about?" She pulled out her phone, tapped a few buttons and held it up so I could see a listing. My house. I snatched the phone from her hand and scrolled through the details. Linda had used her last days as HOA president to fabricate a foreclosure notice and list my home on the market. She had filed fake paperwork. She actually thought she could sell my house out from under me. I looked up at her, stunned. "You're insane," she grinned. "Just playing by the rules, Nick." That was it. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to beat Linda, I was going to ruin her. Linda Beckman committed felony-level fraud that day. She didn't realize it in the moment, too blinded by her own pettiness, but listing a house you don't own? Yeah, that's a crime, a serious one. And lucky for me, I happen to have every single bit of it documented. Emails, fake notices, the bogus listing. I sent it all to my lawyer. And a few weeks later, Linda wasn't just kicked out of Oak Ridge, she was arrested. I wish I could say she went quietly. She didn't. The day the police came, she screamed bloody murder, ranting about conspiracies, corruption, and a deep state plot against the HOA. Neighbors gathered to watch as she was escorted into the squad car, still shrieking that she was going to sue all of us into the ground. She never came back. Oak Ridge changed after that. Without Linda's dictatorship, the HOA actually became reasonable. The absurd rules disappeared. Fines were revoked. People started talking to each other like actual humans again. And me? Well, I finally got to finish staining my damn porch. Life went back to normal. Peaceful, quiet. Until one day I got a letter in the mail. No return address, no name, just a single sheet of paper with 4 words written in thick red marker. "I'll be back." I stared at it. Then I laughed. "Nice try, Linda."